Hello, welcome players to the weekly lore voice chat for Atheros. Well, I guess it's specifically for the Honua server. It's the first week of November, although I guess it's technically the week of October 31st, depending on how you look at it. Our lore topics that we have on the docket for today, we're going to start by talking about some of the most famous monuments in Atheros. And then after that, we have a question about about the different types of lycanthropes and where they live, things along those lines. And it's not as straightforward as you might think. There was some lore established there about this long ago, but we'll go over that in a little bit. And then if we still have time after going over those, we'll talk about the Underdark as it's been developed in Atheros, as it is somewhat developed already in the creation. And events that occur in the Underdark will influence, well, not will influence events in Honua. I don't want to put it that bluntly, but rather they will eventually be some of the plot events. So like we've seen the Were-Rat event going on here is kind of like one of the more longer-term faction-based events. We'll see that again in the future with one of the Underdark races of Atheros. But that's if we have time for it. So before we get too much farther here into the introduction, we're just going to jump right into our first topic. Oh, hang on. Can everyone see the training montage chat? Let me see here. Let me check the permissions. Thank you for that heads up, Eddie. It might be set. Oh my gosh, no, they can't. Huh. Okay. Thank you very much for that heads up, Eddie. Okay, now they can. Okay. My apologies. Everyone has access now. Okay, so sorry about the delay on that, everybody. We're just going to go ahead and jump into it. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you have access now. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so for anybody who didn't have access in the beginning there, just really quick what we're going to go over today. We're going to talk about some of the famous monuments in Atheros. Then we're going to talk about the lycanthropes of Atheros and where they live. And then we're going to talk about the different Underdark attributes and kind of races in Atheros. Okay, so just kind of jumping into things here. We have here, it's the good old map of Atheros. We're going to talk about some of the famous monuments in Atheros. And this list, it includes a few different types of monuments. Some are kind of your more traditional monument, what you would imagine a monument to be, built by a group of people as a symbol of their power or their current reign, something along those lines. A lot of these monuments fall in that category, but a lot of them are also, I guess, wonders, you could say, like wonders of the world, natural wonders, because, in Atheros, you have so many gods that have natural powers as well. They're not all kind of like man-made monuments, if you will. So there's a bit of a gamut here. But kind of going into it, oh, your kitties wants to come upstairs, and they are meowing so hard. All right, so we're just going to zoom in a little bit here on our first monument. I'm going to have to come up with a better way to do this in the future. I'll maybe just have this open in an actual image and then just manipulate it there. But for now, we'll do it this way. Okay, so Verdetero, which you can see near the center there, it's just above that crescent-shaped Thup's Grin. Verde Terra was a city originally founded by the free humans who came down from the Grand Tier Peninsula, escaping the wrath of Veshta, the evil Ice Queen. In order to protect themselves from the different threats of the Horseshoe Plains, they built these big kind of like stone monuments all around the city. But that didn't really do much to stop the Frost Raiders, the Imperial slaving military arm, basically. It's actually a huge economic arm of the Empire at the time. from just riding in there, bonking the people on the head, and then taking the city for themselves. So the stones themselves, I mean, obviously they weren't the great defensive fortification that they really wanted them to be, but they still stand even to this day. The Empire never took them down, and even actually into the future, as the territory became absorbed by the Empire and kind of grew that cultural and political identity, they still held themselves kind of above the rest as being Terrans, like Verde Terra, right? That's where actually the term for the current empire comes from right now, the Terran Empire. Formerly, it was the Glacian Empire because Glacia was in charge. Right now, it's the Terran Empire because so many of the humans that make up the large body of the empire in the current era, in the third era, see themselves as Terrans first. It's kind of like their strong capital city. And they see those stone pillars that surround the plains around it still being very much a show of force and defensive fortification. You know, they, despite the fact that, you know, practically they're ineffective, they still have a great deal of pride in them, and it still represents kind of solidarity in the face of threats from all sides. So that's the first of the monuments, Verde Terra, and the stone henges, more or less, that were erected around the outside to protect it. The next major monument is probably going to be the ruins of the Great Iron Keep, near the center of where the map is right now. It's just to... I always double-check my directions here. It's just to the east of Mount Everor, by about 100 miles, it looks like. But it's more or less still in the mountains. The Great Iron Keep was built in the mountains surrounding nearby Mount Everor there by Ahuahitoroa and the Keepers of the Flame in the Second Era, in the early Second Era. It's there because Ahuahitoroa was kind of from the east, so when he built his mountain keep, he built it kind of on the east side of, or sorry, on the, oh my gosh, I just did it. No, yeah, east. Yeah, he built it on the east side of Everor there. It was at one time in the early Second Era a great sign of the power of the Keepers and Ahuahitoroa, and if it didn't get destroyed, it would probably be, and if Ahuahitoroa didn't get corrupted, it would probably be one of the most influential cities in Atheros, period, because they could have produced so many great weapons and defensive fortifications, but then also all sorts of different magical artifacts as well. They have great defensive fortifications for themselves, and they have a blessing of the Avatar behind them too, right? So in the early Second Era, the Great Iron Keep was definitely seen as a symbol of power and progress. But in the mid-Second Era, entities known as the Endbringers appeared, and they began to corrupt the land and also the Avatars as well. They appeared in the wake of the Karlach, which is a great psychic entity that we don't have to talk about right now. But the Simurgh, one of the Endbringers, appeared. Oh, hang on, I'm getting a hand from my producer. What's up? They can't hear the chat. Can other people hear the chat? I'm thinking maybe yes, maybe no. Oh, yikes. Do. Okay. Do. Okay. Let's try now. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay. Yes, my apologies so much, Graxif, I'm sorry. I should have just had this in the public channel, but I didn't want to disturb you guys in the conversation that you were having there in the Hangout. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Eddie, darling producer, would you mind making a post that it's open now to people? Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so getting back to it here, the Great Iron Keep. So the Great Iron Keep, and again, just so you know, Grax, if we're talking about the monuments of Atheros right now. So the Great Iron Keep, early in the Second Era, was seen as a symbol of progress and power in Atheros, and a symbol of what Atheros could become in the future. But when the Simurgh attacked it, a being of kind of like great madness, it drove Ahuahitaroa insane. And he basically, in order to kill it, sacrificed himself. He took the Simurgh and he threw himself and it into this big heap of lava, and there's a giant explosion, and the city, like 60% of the city, just fell off of the mountain as the mountainside just totally crumbled and caved in and just fell. And there's almost nothing left of the city. And Ahuahitro was also presumed dead at that point, too. Killed himself to destroy the Simurgh and save what he could of the city and his people, the Keepers. So after that point, there's some refugee camps that are set up in the area. I believe that's what Gred is, in fact. It's a refugee camp that's set up there to kind of assist the old keepers from the ruins of the Great Iron Keep. Some keepers stayed there for a while and continued to kind of worship the old ways and the old image of Ahuahitaroa, but it never, ever got back to anything close to its glory days again. And in the future, actually, I think in the future that we're in right now, Modrons have appeared by the will of Primus, and they've cleared everybody out of the area. So there's no more keepers there at the ruins of the Great Iron Keep. It's just Modrons and some of the different automated constructs that the keepers left behind, kind of roaming and patrolling the area. So, and it's on the right now, like it was built on a cold, snowy mountainside, kind of like using the different geothermic vents that were there as a power source. So now that there's nobody living there, it's just a cold, snowy winterscape with some lava pits here and there. It's pretty inhospitable, so people don't really go there anymore. There might be some keepers. Yeah, the Modrons kill anyone that goes there. At one point, it might have been a site of pilgrimage for the keepers, and maybe they watch it from afar and really wish they could go in, but they can't. We actually covered this in-game a few years ago with someone who wanted to go there basically as a part of their pilgrimage as an artificer. So yeah, but of course people still know of the Great Iron Keep, even though people don't go there anymore, and they know what it now represents, the fallen greatness of the Keepers and what they once were and what they could have been had not Ahuahitaroa gone mad with his lust for war, driven mad by the Endbringer. Okay, so that's the ruins of the Great Iron Keep. Moving on here to our next monument, that's going to be Castle Blatt. I'll kind of zoom in on it in a little bit here. Excuse everything moving around. Get a better zoom. Okay, so Castle Blatt, you can see that it is situated here, kind of on the southwestern edge of the Horseshoe Plains, in the center of the continent there. So there's Castle Blatt, just kind of to the left of the center of the map right now. So Castle Blatt was during the Glacian Empire, like the second reign of it, more or less her stronghold. But before that, when Glacia first appeared, and she didn't have a mighty empire, when she was just the evil ice dragon with a bunch of frost giants that would come bonk you on the head if you didn't give her gold, when it was still very disorganized. Her headquarters was up here in Barlak, the mountain near the center right now. But during the first era, and in fact it might have been very early in the second era, but I think it was the first era, Thup, the god Thup, not the people Thup. Thup tricked Glacia into coming down here to Castle Blatt. He basically enchanted a stone at the bottom of a lake to look like a diamond. And it only looked this way to Glacia, right? And it looked so irresistible that she couldn't leave it alone. I might have talked about this previous lower chats. This is a big point of history. So she saw the diamond, was ensorcelled by it, but because she couldn't leave it, she was like, well, this is my new castle. So she froze the lake, she froze the surrounding hinterlands, turned it into an icy mountain range, or I guess range of glaciers, rather, and then ordered the Thup to craft her an ice palace out of it. So she went down to the very bottom of the lake, built herself a vault down there, and said, okay, now keep bringing me all my treasures and jewels. Instead of being up at the mountain in Barlack and flying around, I'll just stay right here in Castle Blatt, and don't even worry about it. And it stayed that way for a long time. Like, basically, at that point, Glacia was kind of considered subdued. Sure, you had the issues with the Frost Raiders coming around every now and again, but their boss, their god that was telling them what to do, was gone now. So they more or less kind of like fell into tribal politics. You know, each tribe trying to surpass the others in collecting slaves or expanding their mines. And they're also hit by the Karlach just after this. So the Frost Giants are kind of in disarray. Glacia is kind of like considered more or less appeased, defeated, and people just forget about Castle Blatt after a couple thousand years. It's just a few hundred years, even maybe 1,000. It just becomes frozen over, and this hole in the ground that they dump money into, and they know, according to the Great Patriarchy of the Grand Covenant, they're told if they don't dump money, if they don't dump gold into this hole, the right amount every year, terrible happenings will come. That a vicious dragon will come and enslave the whole land, blah, 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 blah. All these terrible prophecies that will come if they don't keep putting gold in the hole. So over the course of 1,000 years, it just basically turns to that. It starts as Thup's great idea to deal with Glacia, and then it turns into, this is a religious tenet that we follow because we know if we don't, terrible things will happen. Well, eventually, the Covenant in their nasal gaving and Thup and the people of the Thup, a lot of them ended up leaving the land, and the Covenant didn't have as much gold. They eventually run out of gold to put in the hole, and Glacia is resurrected. So she's resurrected, she goes around, she eats a bunch of people until people start listening to her, and she instates her power again. This is when she uses the military arm of a lot of the Grand Covenant, or at least the part there that she's able to snatch for herself. And she starts to create what would become the Glacian Empire in the Second Era. A true empire, not just a dragon, again, telling giants to go bonk people on the head. So everything to the south of there, that would continue to be controlled by the Grand Covenant. And I know that right now it shows it as Covenant land, but it's because it was originally Covenant land. Before Glacia was resurrected in the Second Era, it belonged to the Grand Covenant. So the Glacian Wars happen. It continues to be her bastion of power, more or less, until 15 years ago. It's 131 Third Era in the lore right now. 15 years ago, Glacia is defeated, and the Grand Covenant do a large part of the hustle in defeating her. One of the saints of the Covenant, Saint Gustav, and his 12 followers, they sacrifice themselves in order to lock away Glacia forever. And so there you have it. She's dealt with. After that, the Grand Covenant basically said, well, we're taking these lands back. They belonged to us. The new emperor, Varthus, kind of like after that happened, he was like, hang on, let's be friends, everybody. We were enslaved by the dragon, too. We didn't like that. We didn't want to do this to you guys. We were just following orders. Come on. Gotta cut us some slack here. And so everyone was like, okay, yeah, we get it. You're just following orders. Okay, sure, whatever. So the Empire cedes some of this territory to the Grand Covenant in exchange for peace. And the Grand Covenant, as a result, they become the stewards of Glacia's wealth. Now, in the past, Castle Blatt was associated with, like, the highest levels of imperial cruelty and corruption. But now it's pretty much just wealth and corruption, because Glacia's coffers have been turned out. Part of the peace accords that the Imperials made with everybody was, we will open Glacia's vaults, and we will start redistributing the gold that she's been taking from people for 10,000 years. And since the Grand Covenant is in charge of that territory, they happen to be the ones who are in charge of the distribution of that wealth. And they renamed Castle Blatt. They renamed it to the Thesaurian, which is what it's called now, and what you'll probably hear it referred to by everybody except for the most loyal Imperials. They'll call it the Thesaurian. And it basically now, in the current day and age, in the last 15 years, it's turned into the world's treasury. It's where a lot of the gold that's flowing through the land is coming from, and it's controlled by the Thup and or the Grand Covenant. That also includes the Thole and the Tharg and a couple other client races. But more or less, people know it's corrupt, but everybody's getting paid, so no one's really complaining too much. Literally the patriarch of the Grand Covenant, Leandros, who was the legitimate heir to the throne, was just disinherited by everyone in the Covenant by another fellow. Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember his name. Anyways, just in the last 2 years, the patriarch of the Grand Covenant was deposed by somebody 3 times more corrupt than him, just to make money, and it's pretty much an open secret. So much to the point that there will eventually be a revolution in the Grand Covenant led by the followers of the guy who was just deposed, called the Restorationists. But that's a tale for another time. Right now, Castle Blatt, as it stands, it's a monument that was a testament to Glacia's power in the past, and is now a testament to the Grand Covenant's power, and also the money that's being funneled out to everybody all around the world. Okay, so not very far away then is Mount Gomran. You can see that it's very close by. And yeah, I mean, Mount Gomran, that throughout the entire Second Era, that was territory that was controlled by the Grand Covenant, even as Glacia had Castle Blatt not that far away. The Thup and their trickery and a lot of other things, just the fact that it was easier to have her raiders go around up here where there's no mountains and just enslave a bunch of people than it was to go down here and get the Thup, where they've got all their magical defenses and they've got all these other different physical features that just make it a lot harder to invade down there. It was and has always been pretty much the Thuppish heartland, if you will. Mount Gomran in particular, you can see there. It used to be slightly to the west. You can see kind of like the large crater to the west, and then the canyon that leads over to Mount Gomran. Mount Gomran used to be over there to the west until I think it was Cardan Rourke, one of the Covenant avatars, scooted the mountain over in a great feat in order to help protect them better from the Imperials. But even before then, Mount Gomran it's always been a sacred and holy place of the Thup. It was where the Grand Covenant was signed. I've been saying Grand Covenant a lot here. Basically, what that comes down to is, a long time ago, Thup, the creator of the Thup, he decided that navel gazing and going out and having fun was a lot more enjoyable than sitting around and taking his race by the hand and showing them exactly what to do with everything and trying to deal with all of the other avatars. It was just too much work. Screw that. Why would he do that when he could just go out and have fun, right? So he does that. He leaves. And a lot of Thup end up leaving too. But what's left in their stead? Well, there's the Thole. Now, the Thole are a child race of the Thup that weren't really content with navel gazing. They wanted to go out and see the rest of the world. They were much more diplomatic. Rather than learning about the world by introspection, they wanted to learn about the world by going out and studying other cultures, other people, and dealing with those other cultures and people. So the Thole, one of their avatars, Thole, would create this body, more or less called, I'm trying to remember the exact name of it, but it was pretty much the Tholians. It would become this race of people. And then beyond that, they had also created for themselves another client race, the Thup of, you've seen perhaps Stall in the game, the Tharg. The Tharg are they're almost a golem-like race created by the Thup in order to protect them from the Imperials to the north. They form kind of like tight-knit communities called houses, and they're very insular. They very much keep to themselves. They pretty much only leave their lands when the Covenant deems it so. But these three parties, kind of like the Tholians and Thole, the leftovers of the Thup, and the Tharg, these kind of militant houses, all met on the mountain to drink and to sup and to feast and to give praise to Thup and so forth. And Thup saw this union, and he blessed it. And he said that basically you all are now the Grand Covenant. And as long as you all stay together and keep giving glory to me and keep, drinking ale all the time, I will be pleased and happy, and I will give your covenant I will give your group my protection. So that's where the name comes from. The covenant it's basically these three bodies in the area, the Thup, the Tholians, and the Tharg, coming together and saying, we all worship and appreciate Thup. He's a really cool guy. We should put the worship of he and his ways first and foremost and pool our resources in order to better advance ourselves, defend ourselves against the Imperials, so on and so forth. So that sacred pact happened at Mount Gomran. And a lot of the Thargish houses, their headquarters are at Mount Gomran. Bohm, at the base of Mount Gomran, it's one of the most ancient Thup cities. It's now desolate for reasons we don't have to go into right now. But Mount Gomran is some of the oldest Thup territory. And there was also, I think, when the Covenant happened, there was a great cloud, a happy cat cloud that kind of like hovered over it and looked all cool and stuff. But the thing is, just like over time, you saw the changing with Castle Blatt. You also see this changing with Mount Gomran, too, as the Covenant falls into disarray, as they become more corrupt, as they also even get cursed by Lessa. Lessa comes by and the Sphinx god, she curses the cloud so that instead of looking like a cat, which she finds offensive personally, she instead makes it so it looks like something and you're just about to tell what it is, and then it changes shape and it looks like something else. So you can never quite tell what it looks like. Instead, it's just like this enigmatic mystery, like a sphinx. And she says, okay, this is satisfactory to me, and then she flies off. So there's a lot of, kind of subtle changes. And in fact, Thup speaks, I believe, at Mount Gomran. Let me see if this has happened yet in the lore, because I think that would be something important to go over. Okay, so no, not yet. So 135, so probably about 137, third era. So in another 5 or 6 years, like I said, the Covenant's growing more and more corrupt. They just disinherited Leandros. Thup is soon going to sunder his pact with the Covenant, and he's going to do it at Mount Gomran. So in the ancient past, it was the Elysian fields of the Thup, if you will. And even to this day, it's still where the god Thup maintains his spiritual connection with his people. So Mount Gomran is considered holy, very holy by the people of the Covenant. For example, one last example here before I move on to the next monument, the primary Thargish avatar, Carden Rourke, his spirit is said to still reside in Mount Gomran, is said to be crafted of Mount Gomran. For the Tharg themselves, being golems, they were crafted originally from the clay and the dirt and the stone of Mount Gomran. So, Holy Mountain, like, they take that very seriously. The flesh and the blood that is in their bones is the same as that mountain for the Tharg. Yeah. All of their... Oh, yeah, I almost forgot. So, Mount Gomran, like, at one point... a lot of it has been stripped away, but at one point they had inscribed all of their ancient learning, all of their ancient laws on the mountain itself. So all around the mountain, all of the ancient learnings of the Thup. So it's a very important place, significant monument in Atherosian history, especially when it comes to the Covenant, and especially when it comes to the Thup. Yeah. Yeah, let's see exactly when was it created. Let's see, Gomran. Yeah, it was created on the second turn. It was literally the second thing that was or the second mountain that was created. I remember because the creator of the Thup and everything, he made a mountain, and he was like, "Oh, this is gonna be a super sweet place for my race to hang out. It's gonna be so cool." And then I created Glacia and I put it on his mountain, and I was like, "Well, enjoy your mountain now." Ha! So he had to make his own mountain. It was gonna be way better than that other mountain, so he did, and that's Mount Gomran. So there you go. Yeah, so a little bit of ancient history there. Okay, so the Scrybrary. We're kind of still staying in the wheelhouse of the Thup and staying in this current area. If you look at the confluence of two rivers here near the center, the Everor River and the Bomp River coming out of Lake Bomp, you'll see the city Prote, just kind of at the north of the confluence of those two rivers. Prote is a city that is pretty spread out, and it's also built vertically in a lot of layers because there's waterfalls that are coming down there at the Everor River, and a lot of water wheels and things like that, right? A lot of the different feats of engineering that the Thup developed in Prote utilize the waterfall in some way, using the power of the water cascading down to power a water wheel or this magic turbine or this or that or whatever. So the ready availability of water and the force of it coming down the waterfall as well made Prote a bit of a central place for learning for the Thup. And also its proximity to water meant that a lot of Nair felt like a little bit more welcome there too, as opposed to other Thuppish cities which were further away. So Prote was an ancient center of learning, along with Loskar as well, but Loskar, unfortunately, was hit by the Karlach. We don't need to talk about that, cough, cough. But Prote was not. It was spared. And in the city of Prote, there is, the reason we're getting there, is the monument that's called the Scrybrary. The Scrybrary is the largest repository of all knowledge in Atheros. We talked about Mount Gomran being specifically kind of Thuppish learning and everything like that. The Scribrary is where ancient scholars from all around Atheros would come and gather. They'd come and gather in Loskar, and then come and gather in Prote, and then come and gather in Honua, right? Honua became eventually a more mercantile city. Scholars weren't really hanging out there much. Loskar, hit by an attack, the scholars cleared out of there. But Prote, they stayed. And the Scrybrary was more or less the result of their, accumulated learnings. It also functions as like a postal service, if you will, for the Thup. So it delivers messages both around the city of Prote, but then also to the Thup that are in Bohm. And this was, that happened very early on. Let's see here. So 400 second era is when it was created. So the institution of the Scrybrary is about 1,800 years old, initially starting as a sort of postal service for messages being delivered, but then eventually turning into kind of like a more modern university, academy, library, with its own professors and staff and everything like that. So it's a seat of learning and communication in the modern era, the Scrybrary. So yeah, if you need like a a message sent interplanary, and you want to make sure that it's sent just right or whatever, they might, send a message to somebody and then they'll send it out of the Scrybrary, that kind of thing. Okay. So that's about everything here in the Thuppish lands. If we kind of look to the north, we can see that there's this big ice palace. I'll just go ahead and people can see what's there. You can see this ice palace here. Kind of just to the left of Flassans province, the peninsula to the north. That is the home of Vesta. She is an evil ice queen. I'll just be straight up with you here. The creator of Vesta pretty much said that she's the same as the evil queen from Chronicles of Narnia. What's her name? Evil Queen. Evil Queen, that's her name. My producer is confirming it. Yes, okay. So they're more or less kind of the same person, except that Vesta is more evil. She's like... In the histories, things were pretty R-rated. In Honua, in the roleplay world, we try to keep it PG-13 rated. But there was a lot of bad, biblical levels of sacrifice that were happening in some parts in the first era, and Vesta was responsible, and her brother were responsible for a lot of that. But the Ice Palace was the seat of her power. She raised it up in order to protect herself. Let's just go ahead and we can search here. Keep going through. So she created it. Let's see. Okay, so that's the Castle Blatt. Okay, so she created it in the 1500 first era, which would make it about, 15 plus 23, make it about 3,800 years old. So it's about 4,000 years old now. Let's see. Okay. So I guess one other thing to note is that eventually, I'll just go ahead and put this here. Eventually, as you can see from the map, the Ice Palace becomes Imperial territory. And kind of like, I wrote some rules for the airships for myself at the very beginning. I didn't want them to be too super OP, right? Just have it be like, oh, airships bomb you wherever you are. Haha, Imperials go. So I said that they could only land and dock in places where I actually spent points to build an airship dock. So there's also an airship dock for the airships there. I guess to go actually back into the history of it, like the actual true history of the Ice Palace, it was a long time the seat of Glacia's power. Or sorry, not Glacia, Vesta's power. And one of the things that really preserved Vesta's power was her lack of interaction with other people. She kind of just stuck to herself. She was just fine lording over her little slice of paradise, if you will. For a little while, pardon? Oh, yeah. For a little while, she had like some problems from her brother Ilden, but he eventually buggered off, so she didn't have to deal with him as much. You can also see here like a little bit of kind of graying on the eastern side of the Bay of Troy there next to the Ice Palace. It's a giant wall that she built for herself. So at one point when this evil entity was attacking in the Second Era and it was threatening the entire world, rather than banding together with everybody else to help, Glacia just built herself a giant wall. She just built herself a wall to protect herself from the smoke. Oh my gosh, that's Glacia again. Vesta. Vesta built a wall. Vesta built a wall of ice to protect herself from the evil miasma that was coming out of the bay. One other quick, and I guess this is less of a monument, but more of a point of geography. The Lake of Lost Souls in the very center there, that was the site of her even more evil twin brother Ilden's sacrifices. She was lawful evil, he was chaotic evil. He was totally off his rocker. So all of the different bad evil sacrifices and everything, those happened at the Lake of Lost Souls for the lulz. But the Ice Palace now is no longer run by Vesta. Vesta? Did I say it right that time? Okay, I think I said Glacia again earlier. Yeah, okay, I probably did anyways. Okay, Vesta. It's hard when there's two there's like the Ice Queen and the Ice Empress, right? And it's hard. I'm sorry. You got to forgive me, everybody. I guess I shouldn't run for president. Anyways, so Vesta obviously is no longer living. I shouldn't say obviously. Vesta is no longer living in the Ice Palace. She was deposed. She, for a while, was maintaining a strategic alliance with Glacia in order to maintain their dominance of the human holds. But a couple of assassination orders were put out on her. She survived the first hit, but she did not survive the second hit. So as she's laying dying, Vesta's advisors say, you know what? We're going to put her on ice. We'll freeze her in some ice magic. And when we find a cure for this debilitating poison, we can unfreeze her, and then she can do her thing. So they froze her over. And a few years later, she's not going to be in charge of the territory anymore, obviously. That's, power vacuums happen. So as Vesta was on ice, a dragon known as Flasson, who is a bit of a rival to her power in the area, a bit of a thorn in her side, made a deal with the Imperials to more or less take over the area in exchange for governorship. So he's now the provincial governor of that province, which was for a long time Glacia's, or sorry, Vesta's, and now it belongs to the Empire. But what happened to Vesta, you might ask, that popsicle? Well, Varthus, the new human emperor, when he assumed emperorship of the Terran Empire, he traded Vesta to the human king, the Bork, over in Foundrin, which you can see over here at the northern part of the Yellow Territory, Foundrin. The king of the humans, who escaped from Glacia all those years ago, but shared the genetic ancestry with her, Varthus offered Glacia's frozen body to the Bork as a peace offering when they made... Oh my gosh, Vesta's frozen body! I'll get it. Varthus offered Vesta's frozen body. You know what? I should do a shot every time I say Glacia. That'll make me get it right, won't it? Huh? Varthus offered Vesta's frozen body to the Bork in Foundrin as part of the peace offering, right? Because he cedes territory to the Covenant. What does he give to the Borkdom? Well, he says, well, peace with you, and also your revered, honored grandmother, Evil Ice Queen, Vesta. Here you go. I'm going to give her to you. And she is still in Foundrin. The Bork had a special temple, I think it's called the Temple of Silence, built next to his palace in Foundrin, right next to his. And they have interred Vesta there. And it's a site of meditation and a site of kind of ancestral worship. But especially when, things are going bad and you want to pray for guidance and make sure that you make the right decision, that's when you go pray to Vesta. Because she will help give you the strength to do what must be done, no matter what it is. It's one of those kinds of gods. So Vesta, she's still technically alive. She's just on ice in Foundrin. She, I can't communicate with anybody or anything like that, but carbonite style, basically on ice. But, she has a lot of supplicants who were in her territory who are now working for the Bork as advisors and who are now working for Varthus as advisors. So she still is, even though she's in carbonite, her advisors are pulling a lot of strings. Like, she's not out of the game, not by a long shot. Her ambition to rule over humanity and subjugate them is still very much alive in the minds of her advisors who are working for some of the different potentates. All right, so that's the Ice Palace, and then also the Vesta Sickle, or the Temple of Silence, I guess we should call it. Instead of the Vesta Sickle, I have it labeled as in my notes here. I'll change that. Okay. So a couple more here before we sign off. Down to the south, we'll kind of switch gears here. There's the Myrrh Lands. Now, the Myrrh, you may already know of them. They're those kind of desert cat shape-shifty people. They have many different kind of like shades to their personality. Like, yes, they're thieves, but they're not murderers. Like, okay, some of them are murderers, but they're not like killers, they're not like cold-blooded killers. They murder because they have to. They'd really prefer not to. If you could just give them your money, that would be great. So that kind of thing. But their god, Lessa, is a sphinx, and she commanded them to, and also they, of their own volition, because they think she's so cool, built many different monuments to Lessa all throughout the desert. So many different Sphinx monuments. So peppered everywhere throughout the Myrrh Lands. Pretty much anywhere you walk in the desert, somewhere in sight, like how you're playing the video game or whatever, and it cuts to the battle scene, and every time you're in the battle scene, there's like that one thing in the background or whatever. It doesn't matter where you are on the map. It's like, here's the pyramid, it's right there. It's like, but I was like 3 zones over. Nah, you can still see it. It's one of those sorts of things. And it's to help protect Lessa. That way, no matter where you are in the desert, there's a Sphinx watching you, probably more than one. And is it Lessa? Is it just a statue? Is it some other Sphinx? Who knows? You better be on your best behavior. Lessa's watching. One of those kinds of things. You better watch what you do in my desert, outsider. So, I mean, it's surprisingly effective, though. It does keep, kind of the Myrrh on top of their lands. And the Empire's not really... or rather in the past, it wasn't really interested in conquering the desert when it, again, could just take slaves from the grasslands for people who were just growing like weeds. So that helped to kind of protect them as well. But the statues to Lessa, scattered all throughout the desert, helped to protect not only the Myrrh, but also to give Lessa some kind of blinds, if you will, in the desert. So I think what we'll do next is we'll talk about the Shashtani Mountains and kind of the throat of the world. So these 2 mountains here, I mentioned at the beginning. Sorry, I know all of you weren't here for that. I apologize for the permission settings. Sorry, I'll fix those for next time. But the Shashtani Mountains here, they're more of a natural monument, if you will. Not all the avatars were very driven by civilization. Some were more driven by natural powers, if you will. So the Shashtani Mountains, that's where the Isran come from, between those twin peaks. They're kind of like the fertile Garden of Eden of the Isran. And in fact, it's probably like the most mystical place that still exists in Atheros. Like, look at the rest of the map. Everything is conquered or controlled by somebody, sometimes even more than one person. Everything is contested. This part here in the middle, that's a no man's land where you just don't travel there. Otherwise, slavers or anti-slavers just gank you and kill you. The path to the north is safe, but you just don't go through that center area there. It's still, the conflict. It's over. We swear. But over here, in this northeastern peninsula here, with the Abhan Rainforest and the Anya Mountains and the Shastani Mountains, besides Revax, there's nobody else out here that lays any claim to this territory. In fact, Revax has actually kind of helped to protect it from civilization of the 2nd and 3rd era. It's still a very ancient, and I think mystical, I said, place, sylvan sort of atmosphere where you have, pardon? Primal. That's a good word for it. A very primal sort of place. Like this is where those dinosaurs, a lot of them are still coming from in Rome if they're not living in the desert. And there's also a place up at the top, basically, called the Throat of the World, and there's more or less a tale, a fable spoken amongst the Isran, especially those that are enslaved by the serpent people, that say that one day in the future, that Isra himself will appear in order to free all the slaves from the serpents, and that when the time comes for him to do so, he'll ascend to the throat of the world between the Shashtani Peaks, and he'll give out, rah, this mighty roar, and the roar will echo between the peaks, and it'll go throughout the entire rainforest, and it will be pretty much like the signal, if you will, right? So that's one of the reasons why, like the Isran will also use that mighty roar as a signal, like, oh, hey, we're attacking. Better use the roar so that the slaves know the time is now. So the Shashtani Mountains, that's kind of like the monument, if you will, of the Isran's power. We've only got a couple more minutes here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the canals. The beacons are also on my list for the monuments of Atheros, but I want to save those for another day because there's a lot of beacons, and they have their own subplot going. Very important one that I don't want to just gloss over. So really quick, we're going to talk about 2 canals. It looks like one of them actually didn't quite get on here, but that's okay. It can be added. So there's a section here between, I think, Foundrin and where the Green Camp is, where the centaurs from Yggdrasil have dug in a canal. Oh, we also skipped over Yggdrasil. Oh, I need to get to that too. Okay, well, there's a big world tree in the very center of the continent at the Northern Horseshoe Plains there. It's called Yggdrasil. The Oglela own it. It's sectioned into many different spherical rings. The closer to this tree you are, the closer to the center of the rings, the more affluent you are. At a certain point, if you're not Oglela or a noble, get out. You're just not welcome at all. Which, I mean, Honua is kind of the same way, right, with Central District. But the Oglela, they are a caste society. It is written into the lore that they are a not very nice caste society if you're not in one of the upper castes. Like, even if you're mid-caste, it's pretty much like, well, screw you. Hope you like eating paste. But Yggdrasil, it's the mighty life tree. We fight slavers. What? Yeah, you're lucky that you have paste to eat. Exactly. You better watch out. It'll send you one of the outer rings. You're going to be a dissident like that. But they're also, like, to a lot of people, they seem like a better alternative than the Empire. It's like, well, oppressive caste society, or I could be a slave. I'll take the oppressive caste society. That I have some semblance of freedom. I might not have a guaranteed meal. I might not have a guaranteed warm place to sleep. But at least I have a guarantee, like, I can choose my own destiny. I can choose what I can choose where I sleep. Right, sure you can. Anyways, so that's Yggdrasil, just really quick. And then finally, the last canal. Right here in the center of the map, if you look between Crater Lake and I guess kind of like that long bay there, you can see the Dock River. That is an underwater canal that was dug by the Narak, who served as Glacia's, yes, Glacia this time, Glacia's navy during the Second Era and a good part of the Third Era. In fact, I believe the canal was built in the Third Era. Soblek, the High Admiral of the Navy at the time, and now you can see also a provincial governor, ordered the canal constructed in order to do a lot of things, save on time, et cetera, et cetera. But that is considered a great monument, and like it was very intentionally supposed to be a sign of Soblek's power, a way to kind of like show everyone else in the Empire and the world, hey, look, I can do great things too. It's not just Glacia. Like, sure, Glacia's in charge of the Empire, but I'm in charge of the Navy. Everyone knows it. And not only that, I'm making my roads through your land. So what are you going to do about it? It's definitely seen as kind of like almost a subtle veiled threat to like not to the rest of the world, but to Glacian and the rest of the Imperials of like, yeah, we can do what we want where we want. So that's about all the time that we have for today's lore chat. Thank you for joining in, everybody. We don't really have much time for any questions at the end of this one, unfortunately. I will make sure that I make some time for that later. But if you do have any questions, you can just go ahead and post those in the questions forum, or you can send them to me, and I will address them as soon as I can. All right. Well, thanks for joining, everybody. I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.